Welcome kindreds, it's Jessica. In my last video I shared that I'm no longer bullet journaling, but I am still journaling. And one thing I definitely want to continue with is leaning into the moon phases. So I thought I would experiment this month with planning with the moon instead of with the usual solar calendar month. Now that the pressure is off my journal, having to hold all my appointments and day-to-day stuff, I feel like I have more space to play like this. The way that I work with the moon cycles is from new moon to new moon. I made a couple of videos about the moon cycles and how you can work with the energy of them. I'll try and remember to link them in the description if that'll be useful. So it makes sense to me to plan from new moon to new moon and see how that goes for a while. So this coming new moon is in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a mutable fire sign and it's seeing a lot of action during this lunar cycle, with Venus and Mercury present there with the Sun. And I think it will be especially potent this year because the traditional ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, will be crossing into its other rulership sign of Pisces. So there's a lot of emphasis on Jupiter energy, which is expansive and often feels positive and helpful. For me personally, Sag is my third house, which means there will likely be expansion in those third house areas of communication and connection, short distance travel, local community and siblings. So my plan is to take all of this astrology information and use it to inform my planning for the coming moon cycle. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I realised that I do my best planning when I work with 3 phases. And the first phase is to reflect, to look back on what happened in the previous cycle, what I've been doing and feeling, and also how on point I was with what I thought would be coming up energy-wise, and then how things actually unfolded. So this month, or month, has been kind of a mixed bag. There have been some really sad things I've been dealing with. I've been to 2 funerals this month, both of people who died very suddenly and unexpectedly. October and November is a time of remembrance in my culture, and I always feel a kind of heaviness, sadness at this time. But this was definitely emphasised this year with those losses. Usually it's more of a general resistance I feel around letting go, of allowing death to come, which, is always difficult for mortal humans. But this year, that resistance has been very specific. I was not ready to lose those people. I guess we never are. But then, as a beautiful counterpoint to that, I felt really supported and inspired this month through the Circle of Kindred's Facebook group, which I created a few months ago as a place for people who enjoy my channel and the kinds of things I share here to hang out, but which has now taken on a life of its own in the most wonderful way. I was able to pull back from leading within that circle while I dealt with the sharpest end of my grief, and I felt held and lightened by reading other people's sharing. So that's something I was really grateful for this month. I have made a note of the decks I worked with this month and the books I've been reading, films I've been enjoying, things like that. But I think I'm going to make a separate video talking about those things specifically. I asked on my community tab whether you guys would enjoy monthly wrap-up or reflection videos, and a lot of you said yes. So I've been thinking about how to do that, and I'm wondering about maybe making like monthly wrap-ups rather than monthly. So I hope that's okay. But I don't want this video to turn into that. I want to stay focused on the new moon ritual. So basically all of that reflection was just part 1 of the ritual. And part 2 is where I begin to draw in information about the energies which will be surrounding me in this coming moon cycle. So for me, this means looking at the astrology and also bringing in some cards and a woman rune. So first of all, I'm going to look at the astrology, and to do this, I like to use the lunation charts, which are in my honeycomb planner. I did do a flip through of this planner. It's like a personalised astrological almanac. I'm going to put it as a separate video as well. I'll try and upload that soon. I'm just kind of showing this because this is really unusual and really useful if you're into astrology. So in the back of this planner, they have the lunation charts. You can also find these in other places as well. Ignore the asteroids and things like that. I like to sort of look at this. I look at the planetary speed, like we've got a lot of planets retrograde and stuff at the moment. I made my own like little stickers, for just blank stickers of the zodiac, so I can make these like little mini. So I've done my own like mini version of this lunation chart and stuck it into my journal. So this is the next page now. I know this ritual does seem kind of long, but it's not really. I think it's probably going to take like me about an hour and a half to complete it all together. Obviously I won't like make an hour and a half video. I just want to kind of show you the main parts of it. So if you want to follow along with it yourself, then, you know, you can do that. Like you can do your own reflections of what has been going on for you. And like when I'm doing the reflections, I didn't say this, but I like to kind of like look back, look in my calendar, look in my phone photos, look back through my journal, you know, and see what I've been doing and making notes on and things through the month as well. And that really helps me to kind of see how it's all kind of coming together. And then, yeah, so this part is what I'm calling the research part. Part 2 is the research part, which is where I'm looking at like what is upcoming in the energy, so first of all, the astrology, that's what I'm going to do. If you're not into astrology, you can like totally not do the astrology bit. But if you are, you know, you just do it to the level that feels good for you. Like for you, it might be like watching somebody talking about the energies of this next moon cycle. Like for me, looking at this chart, like we've got a Leo rising chart, which when I get like Leo rising charts for this lunation, like the chart for the lunation is like a kind of birth chart for this period, this new moon. So it goes from this new moon till the next new moon, which is just before Christmas, just after the solstice. So it's kind of like that gives you the character of this period of time, and that's why the lunation charts are so helpful. I like to look at the ascendant, like the big three. You know, we talk about the big three in astrology. We talk about the ascendant. We talk about the where the sun is, where the moon is. Well, obviously the sun and the moon are both in Sag because it's the Sagittarius new moon, and when we have the sun and the moon together, you know, they're together. If all of this is like going over your head, I did make a whole series of astrology, which I'll also try and remember to link that, because it's really like, I think people see astrology as being kind of like complex, and like it can be really complex, but it's also really practical, and you can use it in a really practical way. And that is how I like to use it. It's like to actually inform what I'm going to be doing. I'm looking, oh, okay, it's Leo rising. So Leo rising is about like self-actualization, like the kind of personal values, how I shine personally. And interesting for me then, I look, because Leo is ruled by the sun, I'm going to look and say, okay, so my sun is in Gemini. What's going on in Gemini at that? My natal sun is in Gemini. Mars is retrograde in Gemini. Okay, interesting. So Mars, you know, kind of aggravating, kind of like likes to throw out toxins. So already for me, that's like bringing up a picture of this lunation cycle is going to be about like shedding, like almost like bloodletting of stuff that is not making me shine because of that Leo rising and that Mars in Gemini going across my natal sun. Let's just look at where the sun and moon are as well, and like we can do that, and like this is the same for everybody. Like that's a little bit more personal for me because my sun is in Gemini. So sun and moon here in Sag, we've got Venus there, and we've also got Mercury there as well. So that's like a whole, like that is a stellium. Like the sun and the moon are always together at the new moon, so it kind of counts. Are they together in Sagittarius? And then Venus, so like is like kind of very soothing, also kind of gentle, but not really, like accepting, very much about self-love, that kind of thing as well. And Sagittarius for me is always about like truth questing. Like I put some of those keywords down when I was making it. I've written like quest, truth, expand, grow, because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and that is what Jupiter is about as well, you know, is like expansion, definitely. And sometimes it can be expansion of like things we don't want, but that's the whole point, isn't it? It's like we dig into it and we're like, okay, I don't want to expand those things. Let's see if I can shine that energy, direct that energy onto the things I do want to expand. So Mercury also there. Okay, so like ideas, communication, play, you know, and look, it's opposite that Mars in Gemini, opposite my natal sun. And like Mercury and Mars are kind of like traditionally enemies as well, so they're kind of aggravating of each other. So you might find that there's like a pushback against play, and I wonder if that is to do with these like themes of like truth and self-actualization as well. Like whether in this cycle it's going to be about allowing ourselves, like self-love, allowing ourselves to play without like judging. You know, like sometimes when you're doing something and it's like just for fun, and people are very like critical in this day and age of doing things just for fun, because we're supposed to be like grinding all the time. We're supposed to be working on stuff, being productive. And I feel like this cycle is going to be about play and joy for the sake of self-expansion, self-actualization, getting to know ourselves, and not about producing something, making content. You know, it's like, no, that is not it. It is play for the purpose of finding out more about ourselves, finding out about the beautiful, you know, that Venus there, the kind of lovely traits about ourselves which make us shine, make us special. So that's what I feel like I'm going to be working on. And, you know, like, yes, there's some personal transits and stuff there. I won't journal all that bit in because that'll be boring for you guys to see that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how I do it, you know, so I'm trying to kind of keep it a little bit meta from that perspective. So I look at the lunation chart and I make some notes. So these are observations just of this lunation chart. I also like to make some notes of, like I say, the kind of ingresses and my transits. So obviously, because it goes over the 2 months, the cycle, it starts in November. Let me get to the November, oh here we are, November 2022 chart. So this is what's happening in November. The moon is on the, it tells me, doesn't it, on the 23rd. So I'm only actually looking at these later on, little bits of this, of what's going on here. And then I can also look at my overview and see like what's going on for me personally. So the blue ones are like kind of the personal things. And there is like a little bit, but not like loads. A lot of these things are like aspect into the asteroids and stuff, which I'm not really looking at that too much. I have started looking to the zodiacal releasing, but yeah, I'm not going to talk about that in this video either, because that does start to get a little bit complicated. And then I'm also going to look at December, because the next lunation, the next lunation is the full moon, but the next new moon is the 23rd of December. So the whole start of December is going to be stuff that I'm going to want to look at as well. So I'm going to want to look at like lots of state. Oh, that was something else I wanted to say to you about this moon as well, is that just after this moon is in Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is currently retrograde in Pisces, which is the other sign that it rules, traditionally rules Pisces as well, with Neptune, who is like the modern ruler of Pisces, which is really interesting in itself, you know, that is happening there. And in this chart, that's the 8th house, which is the house of like kind of death and rebirth as well. So it's like an opportunity to, like, again, like that's kind of shedding of the toxic stuff, it's like a wound has been like festering under the surface, and now is time to like kind of lance that boil kind of thing, if I'm not mixing too many metaphors up there. But just after the lunation, like a couple of hours after the new moon, Jupiter, which is the ruler of the new moon, goes direct in there. So Jupiter's super strong, because when planets are stationing either to go retrograde or direct, they're even stronger, they're even more emphasized. So this is a really like, it feels, after the astrology we've been having for the last couple of years, I feel hopeful when I see this. And yeah, and I want to take that kind of hope into this next cycle when I'm doing this research, doing this planning. So I hope that makes sense. I'm going to be looking at December, like I said, as well, and I will look at like my personal transits for December and see like, okay, what's going on for me in this month, you know. I usually just I'll make some notes here, but I'll do that afterwards when I'm not like talking to you guys about it at the same time. Okay, so I will do this next part together because I think this will be like relevant for, hopefully for everybody who's watching this, because this is going to be like, yes, the personal energy for me, but I feel like also rippling out as well. So I'm going to use my Weaver's Oracle. I've done like a walkthrough of this on my channel. You may have seen this deck before. It's an indie produced deck, and it is quite expensive, but it's because it's a really beautiful and like well made and many years went into the creation of this deck. It's like a kind of, it's almost like it feels like a sort of set of ancestral voices. And I like to take one of these on the new moon, although I didn't on the last new moon, which I think, to be honest, with everything that was going on, I kind of lost a little bit of the flow with some of my practices. So I didn't take one on the last new moon, so I'm gonna rectify that now. That's the beautiful thing about working, well, one of the beautiful things about working with the moon cycles is that you get the opportunity every month to you know, to start again. You get a new moon and we start again. So I'm just gonna, these are obviously enormous cards, as you can see, so they're not the easiest to shuffle, although they are nicely bendy, so they actually do shuffle okay if you can get your hands around them. So I'm just kind of like doing the best I can with them here, and I'm going to take a card as guidance for the moon cycle. Okay, so we'll see how this kind of like relates to what I've been saying about the astrology, and I find like often that they just kind of tie in unsurprisingly, and sometimes they don't, sometimes they have like something else to say. So let's see. Wow. Okay, so the Weaver's Oracle card that I've pulled is Silence, the Hollowing Woman, and it is number 52, which seems kind of apt as we're coming to the end of the year as well. Let's see what it says in the book. There's like this whole book is kind of esoteric. So it's not like, you know, when you pull a card it's like this means this. It's like, no, you don't get any of that. You've got to like do the work for it. So I tend to make like a page. I'll do that here. I'll print out like a smaller version of this and I'll do some writing about what this means here. So Silence, the Hollowing Woman, she restores the grace of protecting veils. Interesting. So yeah, I was talking about boundaries. I don't know if I actually mentioned that when I was talking to you about it, but I've made a note about this with boundaries, because Saturn is in Aquarius, which is the home sign of Saturn, and it's opposing this. It's like it's the 7th house for this lunation, and the 7th house is all about relationships. And I was wondering if that meant an opportunity to look at that in kind of like a healthy way, but also in like an Aquarian, thinking outside the box kind of way. So yeah, interesting. So all of these have like her yarn, her braid, her cloth. I'll read a little bit of it. I won't read the entire thing because that might not be interesting. So yeah, let's go. The Hollowing sisters knew there was a double edge to the task they undertook. The veil that hid a woman safely could also be the veil that weighed heavily upon her soul. The veil that gave her anonymity was also the veil that might take away her strength. The veil that protected her was sometimes the veil that condemned her. The Hollowing sisters would say, "Where do we reclaim the power and magic of our sacred veils?" Then they would stand together in silence and draw the folds of their thick shawls around their ancient faces. They knew well what might be concealed beneath protecting veils. There were many times when they had walked unseen inside their cloth to places where women needed invisibility to guard them in their perilous lives. The Hollowing sisters witnessed women who drifted far too passively inside their grief, or paced about in anguished agitation, or rocked with madness on the ground. They saw lamenting women who threw their ragged voices up into the sky, or simply gazed through heavy curtains of pain pulled tight across their eyes. There were distressed women who carried on their backs dead babies and bleeding children and broken lovers and burned earth and choking prayers. There were dismantled women who had lost everything but the air they lived by and the shadows at their feet. There were despairing women who had drowned beneath churning waters of grey sorrow, or who were washed back and forth beneath a chaos of conflicting tides. There were women raked by their bereavement, cut wide open, ripped into fragments and dissolved. "Where have you hidden my broken child?" those women cried out. "With what darkness do you haunt my mother's bruised mind? Do you steal from his dying lips my brother's last prayer?" Then the Hollowing sisters went to those women, moving slowly among them, opening arms to gather them beneath their protecting veils. They bore witness to the sufferings of those women. They brought silence to those women. And in that place of stillness, with the concealing cloths of the ancient sisters wrapped securely around them, the sorrowing women found rest and refuge and respite from their pains. With the protection of the veils, shielded from the eyes of ravenous gods or merciless men of war or punitive regimes, the sorrowing women were gently restored. Grace was returned to them beneath the veils.
Clarity was smoothed into their souls. The love of the hollowing sisters was far fiercer than the cruel steel of any hellfire god. The strength of their protection was far more enduring than the arrogant greed of any rapacious horde. In that way, women would reclaim the resilience and power and magic of their sacred veils. Wow. Okay. So, yeah, I'm getting a bit choked up about that because it is just so on point with how I've been feeling and how, like, things have just been going in the world, you know? So, yeah, I'm not going to apologise for that, but I almost did. So yes, that feels very on point, and I think I might literally take up that potential of the veil this month, and perhaps that will be protective for me, for my energy as well, to hold me. Yeah. And it kind of connects in with what I was saying in the first part of this video, where I was talking about like the reflections as well. Like, this time of year is about that. It is about sorrow in a lot of ways, you know. It's that time where things are dying. The trees are dying here in Wales, you know. Well, not the trees don't die. The leaves are dying and dropping and falling. The energy is being pulled down and in, and that's how I feel. And that actually really hit the spot with that, which is why I'm kind of choked up now. So yeah, also interesting because it ties in with this this rune of the Labyrinth, which was the rune for the last moon cycle, and feels like probably still moving with that. And I feel like it also, let me get my lunation chart back up, it very much speaks to this you know, this Venus in Sagittarius opposite this retrograde Mars in Gemini. That idea of like cutting and slicing, but finding refuge from that cutting and slicing. So it's like, yes, there does need to be a release. There does need to that boil does need to be lanced, but there also needs to be protection. There also needs to be holding. There needs to be space, boundaries, nurturing, holding. Yeah, okay, so that's obviously really struck a nerve with me, and maybe with you. Let me know how you feel about that. And so I'm gonna take a new rune as well for the moon cycle. We actually work, the weavers I work with personally through the month, but the rune is something that I share in the Circle of Kindreds, which I mentioned earlier in this video as well. And it is, I'm doing the same shuffling now, I'm still thinking about it in that way. It is something which sometimes I seem to work with a lot, and other times I don't so much, but yeah, I share it in the circle a little bit about it, and from the book as well. This is from the Woman Runes, which was originally a system created by Shucking in Mountain Water, and she allows for it to be spread as long as you don't change the original thing. So Molly Reamer, who makes a lot of the goddesses, which you'll see around my space a lot, like this one that I have here, always one close to hand. So yeah, I'm going to take the rune, and this is going to be our rune for the circle if you're in circle and you're wondering. Yes, it is. The rune is going to be the rune that we will have for our lunation cycle. I've been doing it like as a live video over there in circle, but obviously now I'm doing, okay, so this one has just jumped out with the pendulum, rune 11. Rune of karma, justice, ethics, trust, conscious, old patterns. Interesting, old patterns. Let's have a quick look in the book for that as well. But straight away I'm thinking about how, you know, like the hollowing woman allow for the veiling. It's like a veil of protection within when places aren't safe. And yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how that feeds into the idea of like patterns and conscious and trauma and justice as well, you know. So it says, stop making bargains with life, with yourself, with the divine, and let the pattern unfold and the rhythm emerge. What once was will be, what will be will be, what is is. It has been said that the arc of the universe is long and bends towards justice. Root yourself in an ethic of care. Trust that as the pendulum swings, tick-tock, tick-tock, it will eventually return to partnership, cooperation and love. Okay. Yeah, so that's very reassuring. There's obviously more, much more to work with there, which I'll share in the circle too. But yeah, that feels very powerful. It doesn't look like it's going to be, like I wondered about this month being playful. Like I said, you know, with that whole idea of this Sagittarius and Mars is better on here, isn't it? Let me show it to you again on here. So with this lunation starting here with the planets, with Mercury there as well, which often brings a kind of playful, but can also be like adversarial, can also be to do with like ethics as well, and like kind of things swinging either way. And like, yes, things swinging either way, that was it as well, isn't it? With the veil, it's that idea of like, sometimes the veil can be a protection and sometimes the veil can be a problem, a barrier. Yeah, really interesting, like layers of things for me to pick through for this month. And yeah, Mars opposing all of this, Mars in Gemini on my Sun opposing all of this. Venus there is that kind of like loving, breaking old patterns for sure, and maybe finding a way to the more coherent world. That Charles Eisenstein, who I love, talks about the more wonderful world we knew was possible. It's not quite right, that what I just said, but yeah, he talks about that, and it is that, isn't it? It's like at the moment we've kind of swung too far one way and we've like kind of lost our center, but in the overall scheme, the overall path, it will be we will come back to a place which feels loving, where we feel held. And obviously, like, you know, it swings. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not going to journal all that now while we're here together, because that would be not very helpful probably. But I just wanted you to show, and so these pages are going to be filled with that, with my research, with my thoughts about those things that have just come out here. And then phase 3 of the planning, so I said it came in 3 phases. The first phase is the reflection on what has been in the last moon cycle, and then the second phase is the research, the kind of pulling in the energies, the kind of getting inspiration from different places. And you know, you don't have to use a weaver or a rune or the astrology or anything. You know, you can pull that inspiration from things you see in nature. You can pull that inspiration from like whichever makes sense to you. You can use tarot, you can use anything. But it's just kind of like getting a gauge of that energy that's surrounding you at the moment as you go into this next cycle. And then part 3, the third part, is about like putting that information and that reflection into practice. So it's like, okay, so given what I know now, it's probably not the best month to be planning in, say, well, ironically, as it's like going to be over most of December, like loads of like super light social activities. Perhaps the lessons will be more this month about like sort of saying no to things and allowing myself to withdraw into that veil if I need to. But also, you know, I've got that wisdom now that if I am going to be interacting, then potentially I can cover, I can veil, which will help protect my energy in situations and things as well. So it's finding that balance. Sorry, my computer's making noises in the background as well. Yeah. So part 3 is about that. It's about putting that into practice and sort of thinking how my month is going to go based on all the information that I've gathered already. And it'll also be about putting down things like that I've committed to, like the things that I'm learning. At the start of my journal, or somewhere nearish the start, yeah, here, I made like the sort of list of things that I'm working on. So I'm going to need to look at this and see, right, does any of this like fit in with the feel of that? And like I'm gonna, this is an experiment. I am experimenting with this particular new moon ritual. I'm gonna try it for at least a good few moon cycles and see how this pans out. But yeah, I'm gonna be looking and sort of thinking, right, okay, what fits with this energy that is coming up for me in this cycle? Which of these projects does it make sense to be working on now? Rather than going with that format of like, take no notice, this is what I want to happen, this is what I will to happen, and so this is what will happen. No, you know, I'm gonna go with, yes, my will is important as well. You know, it is a Leo rising lunation, so myself, my joy, my happiness is important. But the way that I can best support myself in that joy and happiness would be by choosing to work on the things which fit with those themes that have come up for me now. So yeah, so part 3 is going to be a much more kind of practical, okay, so given all this is what I'm going to be focusing on this cycle. And then when I've come to my next new moon, I can sort of see, and like at the full moon I'll check in with it and sort of see how I'll probably check in before that as well, but I can see how I'm getting on with it. Let me know what you think. Like, do you want to do this experiment with me? Perhaps this is something that we can do. And I won't share my finished pages here. Maybe I'll share them over on Instagram, or perhaps I'll share them like in the community tab or something, if it's not like mega personal stuff that I'm going to be writing down in here. So thank you so much for watching. Almost blessings, and I'll see you very soon.